let's jump right in to create our first console application. I have opened the Create New Project dialog box from Visual Studio 2019. And the first one I have selected here is the console app for .NET Core. Now, if it's not first in your list, or if there's other things you might see in this list, you can filter this by language first, so C#, and then by platform if you'd like to. But notice how the console application is Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. Then you come over here and say, I want the console application, and that gives you just the two that are available in C# on my particular installation. Now those two are .NET Core and .NET Framework. What you're looking for is the .NET Core version. That's what we'll be covering in this course. So select that and hit Next. Now we need to give it a name. Now I'm particularly fond of calling this Console UI. You could call it Core Console UI since it is a .NET Core version. It's up to you if you want to do that, or if you're more specific about what the console is doing. It's up to you. We'll leave it at Console UI for this demo. I'm going to change from Demo Apps. Let's put this in the Getting Started folder. And then I'm going to call this something different. So let's give this a different solution name. So our first core console. And that's a solution name. I'm not going to place a solution and project in the same directory. I'm going to keep them separate. That's a preference thing, but it's a pretty standard preference. And I hit Create. And once this gets created, it's going to have basically what looks like the .NET Framework version, open down here, the .NET Framework version of our application. It looks, like I said, very similar. So you got this static void main, you've got console write line. Now, if you look over here on the right, it does look a little different. Instead of having about 3 or 4 different options or things on the right here where dependencies is, it has just dependencies. So if you're looking for references and things like that, they're all under dependencies. Notice NuGet and SDK. And this is the first place where we see a little bit of a difference in the .NET Core version. The design here is that you can bring the framework version along with your application. So if I built this application against the .NET 2.2, which I believe this is, let's check to make sure. Oops. Let's go to properties here. And it's on, .NET 3.0. Let's change it to 2.2. And hit save. There we go. So now it's on .NET Core 2.2. So it's going to bring the .NET Core 2.2 SDK along with it. There we go, right there. So we're all set to bring this application somewhere else and have the full .NET Framework, even if that machine didn't have the .NET Framework installed, or if it had a different version. It's still okay. We bring that with us so that we don't have an external dependency on the machine having it for us. And so that's a big deal difference from what it used to be. All right. So now I believe, okay, it does not have any NuGet packages right now. So it's saying, it's saying that there's nothing here. It used to say NuGet, but now we got to change it to 2.2. It doesn't anymore. However, I can still right click and manage NuGet packages, add one, and then that section will show up. Now, to start this, just like we would normally, we can hit the play button, and that brings up our window here. Now, here's a little difference. It says hello world, and then it has this message down here. It says, hey, we've exited a code of 0, which code of 0 means success, to automatically close the console window when debugging stops. Go to Tools, Options, Debugging, automatically close the console when debugging stops. So right now, we don't have a console read line at the end. We say, you know what? Instead of having to force that every time, we can just do this instead, where we say, hey, you know what? You're in debugging mode, therefore, we're going to keep this open until you hit close. So it's up to you if you want to do that or not. But you can turn that off, like it shows, Tools, Options, Debugging, and uncheck the box that says automatically close the console when debugging stops. I'm sorry, check the box. So we don't have a console read line, but we could. Now, the command here is just the same, console write line. And in fact, if we did, CW tab, we can do the same thing as well. Something like that. And just like before, it'll work just the same. So hello world, hello getting started group. So that's really the basics of a console application. Now you may be wondering, that's great, but what really changed besides the dependencies? Well, this is using the .NET Core framework, which is what we're learning about. And the .NET Core framework has a few benefits over the .NET framework, which sounds a little weird having .NET Core and .NET framework. The .NET framework is a framework we've developed since, I say we, Microsoft has developed since, pre 1.0 days. And they've brought it forward over and over with different iterations. They keep adding to it and changing it. The problem is it got a little bloated. And it's hard to take out the bloat without breaking backward compatibility. And so they kind of went back and redid a lot of the framework and started kind of from scratch and built a new framework based on the .NET framework that's much faster. The other benefit here is this application can run on Mac and Linux. It can also run on Windows, obviously, since I'm running on Windows right here. So what that means is this is truly cross-platform, and it didn't really cost us anything. It still works the same way as it used to. There are some tweaks. For example, this is one of the things we'll cover in a future video in this series, and that is there is no app.config file here. So we'll have to add our own configuration file, and we'll write in JSON, not in XML. You could write it in XML if you wanted to. I don't prefer XML. So let's look at, if we open the folder in File Explorer, let's go to the bin folder and look at debug. Notice it's got two different folders here. We've compiled it twice, once in the .NET Core 3 and once in 2.2. So let's look at the differences between the two. So .NET Core 2.2, there is my entire application. Now, what you may be missing is an exe. There isn't really an exe here. There's just a DLL. And the reason why is because we don't run executable files on Linux and Mac. And so what happens is we'll actually do a command at the command line that says .NET space console.ui.dll. And that will use the framework that we may have even in that folder itself. It'll use the framework to launch the console application we just built on any platform, and it will launch it in the way that that platform needs. So that's a little bit different. Now, if we look at the 3.0, nothing in it right now. Okay. So there's some runtime configurations. We can look at that real quick. Let's pull it across. It says it's using the framework 2.2. It's .NET Core app, and the version is 2.2.0. So it's telling the person running this, the application running this, this is how you run this application. Dependencies, look at those. And there's not much here except it depends on .NET Core 2.2. And there is one console UI library. And it's type project. It's not serviceable. Okay? So you don't have to get into the weeds of this, but I just want to kind of show you how it's a little different. Now, if you're on Windows and you wanted to take this and run it on Windows somewhere, how would you do that? Well, you actually publish it. So if you right-click on console UI and say publish, and it's going to say where you want to publish this. Let's publish to a folder. We'll publish it right in the bin release netcore 22/publish. And once that's done, we can come back up here to our bin folder, go to release, netcore 22, publish folder, and there is our published application. To run this, we go to our command prompt and type And since this is now running in production, it's not keeping that development window open for us. It's closing the application down, which is fine. That's what I want. I want to go back to this prompt because we're running it at a prompt. Okay? So that's how you actually run this application. A little different than having an exe, but this way it can run on any platform. You can take it to Mac and run it. You can take it to a Linux machine and run it. Now, in the next video, we're going to dive into how to get our settings back like we have in app.config, only really a lot better, or can be. So we're going to dive into the basics, at least, of the app settings.json file.